Today we had the arraignment for Officer Million on one count of voluntary manslaughter from an incident that occurred back on November 6th of last year. This was when law enforcement and emergency vehicles were responding to a single vehicle incident that had occurred on Interstate 64, and during the course of that investigation regarding that single vehicle accident, there came a time that there was an encounter between this officer and the driver of that vehicle, Mr. Tony Singleton. We do want to advise that a special grand jury had been convened for the purpose of hearing evidence and listening to witnesses and observing certain evidence. And yesterday is when that panel unanimously came down with the indictment, finding that there was probable cause for the indictment that was then presented today in court.
Whose idea was it to do this special grand jury?
This was my idea, along with my chief deputy Michael Huberman, and we decided that for this particular case that we would impanel a special grand jury of Henrico citizens to hear this evidence and present to them just the facts and to tell them what the law is, but certainly not making an argument one way or another, but certainly allowing them the opportunity to review the evidence, convene amongst themselves, and make the decision about whether or not they believe probable cause exists.
I know he has his next court appearance is February 28th. PR bond, $25,000. What else? You already kind of stated the facts of what happened that night. There were two individuals in the vehicle, though. Is that accurate?
There was a passenger who was also in the vehicle, who was also subject to the same single vehicle accident that had occurred in the median, where the car ultimately came to rest before proceeding on Interstate 64 eastbound. And that there apparently had been some information before, and I do think it's important to let the public know that in the course of this investigation that the driver, Mr. Singleton, did have an edged weapon on his person, and that information was presented to the panel, the special grand jury panel.
Can we call that a machete, or how would you describe that?
It was a bladed instrument that was in the waistband of Mr. Singleton's pants.
Can you say how long a blade?
No.
Question, you work obviously very closely with the police.
Yes.
And in the last couple of years, obviously, there is a change across this country. But what kind of message do you think this sends to police officers in Henrico County?
Well, the charge that we have here today is reflective of an action where one may have observed something and overreacted to a situation. So this is simply a notion that with new laws that were put into place from the Virginia General Assembly regarding how we are to view officer-involved shootings, that we give the same review and analysis of a case that does involve an officer and whether or not they have violated the law. And in this case, it was a grand jury that made that decision that they violated the law. So it's supposed to be for the public to know that, irrespective of who the person is who's subject to the investigation, that it is our job to ensure that that the evidence is presented in the fairest way, and to make sure that due process for any individual is going to be utmost critical, and that we are going to ensure that that's going to happen.
And you've been in touch with the victim's family as well?
We have been in touch, yes.
Okay. I'm just curious as to what kind of their reaction is, if you're able to share.
Not at this time.
Anything else you think we forgot?
I think that's it. I think that was nice general information for you all.
How long of a trial do you think this would take? Do you think this is a one-day type situation or 2 days?
Well, if they decide to go with a jury trial, it could be a 3-day jury trial. We've got a new law in place that says you can ask for the jury to make the determination of guilt or innocence, but allow the judge to do the sentencing. So that sometimes can ease up on the amount of time that is needed to present evidence if you were to get to a sentencing phase.
And if he is found guilty, that would end his police law enforcement career.
Well, that's not for me to determine, but yes, there are, again, other laws that were passed by the General Assembly regarding decertification, and a conviction of a felony, I believe, is one of those factors that they can consider.